Hello, I'm Perry Farrell from Jane's Addiction. You're watching Heavy Consequence. Here we go!
I wanted to start off to ask you about this new concert series that you and your wife, Eddie, have started, Heaven After Dark. And it sounds really interesting. I'd love to hear more about it. And I understand you put on the first show.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to tell. It's kind of like I went back to my roots, which was the Los Angeles Underground. And I want to see what's going to germinate there. You know, after I came up from the LA Underground, 1982, 83, something like that. Believe that? And it was a really fun scene. I mean, it was wild, and it was like kind of like Road Warrior-esque.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, fast forward to today, so many different ways people are entertaining themselves and making music and art and expressing themselves. And really the hotbed of expression is in the emerging, musicians, the emerging artists. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Cool. And I was reading about it, and it reminded me a little bit of just the description. You know, there's some multimedia aspects to it and stuff like that. And it reminded me a little bit of the Velvet Underground, Andy Warhol, Exploding Plastic Inevitable that used to go on in the village and in the city. And I don't know, is it fair to say that that's part of a little bit of an inspiration?
Yeah. We took a bite of the apple, New York apple. I like the idea of showing film, 16 millimeter film. You can throw it against the wall, but what film too is really important. So one of the things I asked was, could you get some Warhol Superstar films? We really were doing just what you're saying. You know, it's a good, cheap way to have a great colors, movement of color in the room. And then you've got the human interest. That's kind of all you need, honestly. I mean, that's why we go out, because we're interested in humans.
Very, very cool. And, part of this also reminds me of, you starting Lollapalooza more than 30 years ago. I mean, discovering talent, bringing talent to people. Was there a similar inspiration back then when you launched Lollapalooza? Like, obviously it was on a different scale, but when it comes down to it, were you almost inspired by the same things, bringing like kind of underground and alternative music to the people?
Yeah, definitely. But I'm trying to actually connect the two. You want to know why? Because I think that, listen, God will always put musicians down on the earth, so they'll always be there. But if we can coordinate, unify, music is so good for the earth, and I feel like partly responsible for the amount of music and the type of music. I really do, with having Lollapalooza for so many years. And so what I think we need right now, we need that shot coming from the emerging artists, the emerging culture, because we've been kind of like stymied in our rooms for about 2.5 years. Music industry, they're still hanging on to publishing and downloads. Like they make most of the money still, and it's not conducive for new artists. So the only thing you can do if you want new artists is give new artists love, visibility, encouragement, ideas, and a place where they can all unify and come together and see, check each other out and build a culture. So it has to be done. Otherwise, at the top, where Lollapalooza is, it's going to start to become, it's just going to be stale. You know, you put it this way, you know, and I know we've got very few rock bands anymore. If you look at some of the lineups around the world, festivals, hard pressed to even find a rock band right there. So, but that's really not, it's really not true that there aren't great rock bands. There's a bunch of them, and they're all going to be coming certainly at Lollapalooza's next one, Rock Redemption. It's going to be great. And I just want to encourage them. That's all.
Well, as a rock guy myself, it's great to hear that. And it actually leads me to my next question, because, you know, Lollapalooza in the early 90s and really served as a springboard for a lot of bands' careers. And then on top of that, Jane's Addiction were kind of considered the godfathers of this early 90s, late 80s alternative movement. And the amazing thing is that so many of the biggest rock bands in the world today are those same bands that came out of the movement. When you see the headliners at these rock festivals, there's still Nine Inch Nails, it's still Pearl Jam, it's still Tool, it's still Jane's Addiction 30 years later. And when you look back at that, is there a sense of pride in the fact that you helped spearhead this movement? But is there also a sense of worry in that these are still the biggest bands, and it's taking a lot for these younger bands to kind of get up to those ranks?
They can't do it. The way I look at it, the way you can look at it, it's pretty simple to see. I look at sports and I look at entertainment, specifically music, and I want to work music more like they do sports. As an example, young children go into Little League when they're, you know, like 7 years old. And then they start, you know, then they're encouraged, and they have a high school, and they have a college, and they're always getting smarter, and they have support system. Well, we artists haven't created a support system. Well, we have Lollapalooza, that's a support system. That's the way I look at it. That's why I never sold it. Mm-hmm. It's really a support system. So add on to that support system the way they do the NBA, you know, sponsored by McDonald's. Well, that's their deal. I wouldn't necessarily sponsor with McDonald's, but Fender, certainly. And anyway, so the young people have to be nurtured that way. They have to be raised. They have to be refined, like any other you know, type of business or what you do for a living or a lifestyle. You know, scientists, they're nurtured. That's why they're so good. They've got great professors around them telling them stuff from the past. It's like, this is what we've got so far, right? You don't have that with artists, maybe because we're a bit dodgy. I don't know, but we sure do. I'll tell you what, in the end, we sure provide background and music for the party. And that's as good as anything else, anything else.
Yeah. And when it comes to booking bands for Lollapalooza these days, how involved are you personally in the process? Because I think people are curious, like, you know, how many, you know, does Perry like review a good amount of the bands, or does he has a team, or how's it work?
Honestly, my team is a great group. C3 heads it. I get picks. A lot of times I get run over. It's very, very, very political in those rooms. I mean, you have to imagine there's management and record companies and lots of money all putting their heads down and charging at C3. But anyway, you know, the good news about it all is I kind of, I'm picking up my influence in the booking again. That's why I tell you this year, coming into Chicago, it's going to be heavy with bands. And C3's, you know, done a great job selecting them. I mean, you know, again, looking at sports, a lot of these guys work analytically, right? And you know, but analytics to me is like the head of a body. And when you're really, really thinking clearly, you're thinking with both the head and the heart. So I try to look at myself more as the heart. They're the head. And we'll get some great things accomplished. And I think that it's going to work out.
Great. And I wanted to ask you, because there seemed to be like a shift in recent years away from touring festivals. I know, you know, Lollapalooza started out as a touring festival. Now it's, you know, it has the singular location in Chicago plus international locations in South America. Warped Tour and Ozfest. Yeah, around the world. Yeah. Like yeah. Warped Tour and Ozfest are no longer around as touring entities.
Right.
One, would you ever consider launching a touring version of Lollapalooza again? And also, what change do you think caused these festivals to stop touring along the way?
Well, that's a tough question, to be honest with you, because I did that. Those tours were not my intention. You know, it was somebody else's intention. So apparently their intentions eventually faded. My intentions, as I've told you, like my intentions is to, I'll be straight with you. My intention with Lollapalooza is to bring music around the world, because where there's music, there is no war, and where there's war, there's no music. So I want to seep music into the minds and the hearts of people around the world that don't want to study war anymore. They want to study peace. And that's the first thing that's going to happen, is music is going to break out, right? It's the celebration.